The cabin door slammed open so violently that every window rattled in its frame. Standing there was Patricia Harrington, president of the Pine Ridge HOA, her expression twisted in pure outrage. She jabbed an accusing finger toward me and my dinner guests, clearly ready to deliver one of her infamous rants about noise violations or unauthorized gatherings. But then her eyes landed on him. Sitting at my dinner table, fork halfway to his mouth, was none other than Daniel Morrison, the state attorney general. He paused mid-bite, calmly set his fork down, and dabbed his mouth with a napkin. Then he looked up, one brow arched in that perfectly measured way lawyers seem to practice in front of mirrors. For the first time in the 3 years I'd known Patricia, she didn't say a single word. Her mouth opened, then froze. Absolute silence. Let me back up. My name's Robert Sullivan, and I own a lakeside cabin that's been in my family for 4 generations. My great-grandfather built it by hand in 1922, long before Pine Ridge was even a thought on a developer's blueprint. It sits on 5 acres of private land, completely outside the HOA's reach. But try telling that to Patricia Harrington. Patricia moved into Pine Ridge about 5 years ago and wasted no time running for HOA president. She won easily, promising to restore order and beautify the neighborhood. What she really did was turn into a self-appointed dictator. She'd measure lawns with a ruler, issue citations if garbage cans stayed out longer than 2 hours, and once fined a family $300 because their daughter's sidewalk chalk art was aesthetic clutter. And somehow, my cabin, my private property, it became her personal crusade. It started 6 months ago. Patricia insisted that my land was close enough to the neighborhood to affect property values. First came noise complaints. Apparently, she could hear my occasional weekend gatherings from half a mile away. Then came reports about trash blowing into HOA property, even though there's a dense forest between us. Last month, she claimed I was running an unregistered short-term rental. For the record, I'm a wildlife photographer. I live quietly and rarely have company. But that weekend was special, a small reunion. My college roommate James was in town, and he brought a few of our old friends along for dinner. One of them was Daniel Morrison, our former debate team captain, now the state attorney general. It was just 5 guys, grilled salmon, and craft beer on my deck overlooking the lake. Laughter, stories, and the occasional clink of bottles. That's all. But apparently, Patricia had been spying again through her binoculars. She must have seen the extra cars in my driveway and decided this was her big moment to restore order. I was just serving the main course when I heard the familiar, angry click of her heels crunching up my gravel driveway. Normally, she'd at least knock. Aggressively, sure, but still knock. This time, the door just exploded open, and in she marched like she owned the place. Pressed khakis, Pine Ridge HOA polo, clipboard in hand, the full uniform of self-righteous authority. Her face was red, her nostrils flaring as she barked out her speech. "This is absolutely unacceptable," she snapped, waving her clipboard. "I have documented evidence of multiple vehicles on this property, which constitutes an unauthorized gathering under HOA Regulation 7.3. Furthermore, I have reason to believe you're operating an illegal short-term rental in violation of county ordinance." She froze mid-sentence. Her gaze shifted to Daniel. James had his beer halfway to his mouth. Mark was frozen, napkin in hand. Daniel just leaned back slightly, watching her with calm curiosity. The same look I imagine he uses in court when a witness starts lying under oath. "Ma'am," Daniel said, voice smooth and steady, "could you explain why you just entered this man's home without permission?" Patricia's hand trembled on her clipboard. Her eyes flicked between Daniel's face and the state seal on his jacket, which hung neatly on the chair beside him. "This is HOA business," she stammered. "I have the authority to—" "Do you have a warrant?" Daniel cut in. "Are you a law enforcement officer?" "Well, no, but I'm the HOA president, and this property is affecting community standards." Daniel stood up, all 6'3" of him, and towered over her. His tone stayed perfectly professional, but his presence filled the room. "Ma'am, what's your full name?" "Patricia." "Patricia Harrington," she muttered, her voice shrinking. "Ms. Harrington," Daniel said evenly. Are you aware that entering someone's home without consent constitutes criminal trespass in this state? That's a Class A misdemeanor, punishable by up to a year in jail and a $5,000 fine. The color drained from Patricia's face. But the HOA regulations clearly state— "The HOA rules," Daniel interrupted, "don't override state law. And as I understand it, this property isn't even part of your HOA, is it, Robert?" I nodded, finally speaking up for the first time that evening. "That's right," I said firmly, turning toward Daniel. "My property's been here 60 years longer than Pine Ridge itself. I've told Miss Harrington that several times." Daniel nodded slowly, his sharp gaze returning to Patricia. "So, let me get this straight," he said. "You've entered private property outside your legal jurisdiction without permission, and interrupted a private dinner party in the process." Patricia's composure cracked. "I was just— Miss Harrington," Daniel cut her off, his voice cool and steady. "Do you understand that you could be arrested right now?" Her trembling hands lost their grip on the clipboard. It clattered to the floor, scattering papers everywhere, photographs of my property, printouts of supposed violations, and notes written in her neat but frantic handwriting. "I was only trying to protect our community," she whispered weakly. "By breaking the law?" Daniel asked pointedly. He pulled out his phone, his expression unreadable. "Robert, you mentioned before, you have security cameras here?" "Yeah," I said, pointing toward the corner of the room. "They record 24/7. Audio too." "Excellent." Daniel looked back at Patricia. "Ms. Harrington, I strongly suggest you leave immediately, and I would advise you to contact an attorney before you speak another word." Patricia bent down, fumbling to pick up her scattered papers. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grab them. "Leave those," Daniel added sharply. "They're evidence now." She froze, then slowly straightened, tears brimming in her eyes. Without another word, she turned and fled the cabin, her heels clattering frantically down the gravel path. A moment later, we heard her car door slam, followed by the crunch of tires spinning away into the night. For a moment, none of us spoke. The only sound was the quiet crackle of the fireplace. Then James let out a long whistle. "Well," he muttered, "that was something." Daniel calmly picked his fork back up, his tone steady as if nothing had happened. "Robert, I'll need a copy of that camera footage. And later we'll talk about her pattern of harassment." I nodded, retrieving a folder from the nearby shelf. Inside were months of Patricia's nonsense, unfounded complaints, photos she'd taken from the road, and a collection of emails filled with thinly veiled threats about HOA violations that didn't apply to me. Daniel went through each document carefully, his brow furrowing deeper with every page. "This isn't just trespassing," he said finally. "This is targeted harassment and abuse of power. Has she done this to anyone else?" "Oh yeah," Mark chimed in. "My cousin lives inside Pine Ridge. Says everyone there's terrified of her. They won't even hang Christmas lights without her written approval." Daniel made a few notes on his phone, his lawyerly demeanor kicking in. "All right, I'll have my office investigate. Robert, I'll need you to file a formal complaint first thing tomorrow. This kind of behavior from an HOA president, completely unacceptable." The rest of the dinner went on, quieter now. We tried to laugh and enjoy the reunion, but the tension hung over us like fog. When my friends finally gathered their coats to leave, Daniel lingered behind for a moment. "I'm sorry this happened tonight," he said quietly, "but I'm glad I was here to see it firsthand. People like Patricia think a little bit of authority gives them power over everyone else." He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "She's about to learn otherwise." 2 days later, Patricia Harrington received an official letter from the Attorney General's office. She was under investigation for criminal trespass, harassment, and abuse of authority. The notice made it very clear. Any further contact with me or my property would lead to immediate arrest. By noon that same day, chaos erupted at the Pine Ridge HOA board meeting. My neighbor Tom, who lived inside the HOA limits, called me later, barely containing his laughter as he described the scene. "3 board members resigned right there in the room," he said. "Didn't even want to be associated with her mess. The rest demanded she step down." Patricia tried to defend herself, claiming she'd only been protecting property values and upholding standards. But when the board's lawyer explained the potential criminal liability she'd brought down on them, the decision was unanimous. Patricia Harrington was removed as HOA president, effective immediately, but that wasn't the end of it. The Attorney General's investigation dug up even more. Turns out, Patricia had illegally entered at least 4 other properties in the past year, all under the guise of HOA inspections. She'd issued bogus fines without board approval, and worse, had pocketed some of the payments herself. 3 weeks after she stormed into my cabin, Patricia stood before a judge. The same courtroom where Daniel Morrison had tried dozens of high-profile cases. Patricia looked nothing like the intimidating woman who used to stomp around Pine Ridge. Dressed in a plain gray suit, she stood small and pale at the defendant's table, clutching her lawyer's arm as the judge read the charges. "Ms. Harrington," the judge began, voice stern and unflinching, "you used your position to bully, intimidate, and harass your neighbors. You invaded their privacy, violated their property rights, and undermined the very community you claim to protect. This behavior is unacceptable and unlawful." Patricia swallowed hard, her eyes fixed on the floor. "I hereby sentence you," the judge continued, "to 6 months in jail, suspended pending 2 years of probation. You will also pay a fine of $5,000 and complete 100 hours of community service. Furthermore, you are permanently barred from serving on any HOA board within this state." Patricia's attorney had warned her this was likely, but when the judge said the words, she visibly buckled. Her knees trembled, her knuckles white as she gripped the table for support. Her reign of terror was officially over. "Do you understand these terms, Ms. Harrington?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor," she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks.